right, what do you guys say? Should we get rolling?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Can I see a show of hands, just out of curiosity, who's going to EmberCon? Okay, good. Nice showing. I am excited. I was just looking at the list of speakers today. We have 6 speakers at EmberCon who are Ember NYCers. It's pretty awesome. And just to mention them, Matthew Beal, who I believe is out of town tonight. Is that right? But it's a long time and regular Ember NYCer. Andre Milan and H.M. Kim were probably here. I saw Andre at least. Are giving a talk. Stefan Penner, Alex Machnier, who's up front, and then our 2 of our honorary Ember NYCers, Eric, who's here tonight to give our main talk, and Chris Selden, who's based in Seattle but spends a lot of time out here, and then John Paul also is hopefully coming later. He's running a meetup that he's going to, his own meetup that he's going to sneak out of to come here early. It's not the R meetup though. So that's pretty exciting. I think that's going to be a great time. And then another question, just out of curiosity, for whom is this your first Ember NYC meetup? Raise your hand. Okay, cool. Good crowd. Awesome. Well, welcome. A lot of what I love about Ember is the community that is built up around it. I think that I hope that you will find that it's a very friendly and welcoming group, and people who are kind of really enjoying learning this technology together, building great stuff, and kind of sharing all of that learning and fun together. So tonight we've got 3 talks. I'm really excited about all of them. We are first going to have a talk about Ember controllers, and this is going to, I worked with Corey to try to make this a talk that was both accessible to folks who are new to Ember, if that happens to be you, as well as having some stuff about controllers that even if you've been using Ember for a while, may be new to you. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to switch gears and have a kind of a real-world experience-based report on what it was like building Vine.co from Janessa. And then we'll take a break at that point, and we'll have Eric come up, who's joining us from San Francisco, or Chicago, I guess, officially now, both. And to talk to us about the future of templating in Ember. So with that, I want to invite Corey to come get set up, and then while he's doing that, I want to open up the floor to anybody who has announcements that may include hiring, if you're a developer who's looking for an Ember job, if you have events that folks here might be interested in, please feel free. Ralph, you want to kick off? And Corey, you can come right up and plug in.
Hi, my name is Ralph Holmeyer. I'm on the product team at Vesterly. Vesterly is pioneering a new way for professional and service firms that support them to do their online marketing in a way that actually works by capturing leads and business building data versus brand building data. Business building data like phone numbers, email addresses, names, who they know, versus brand building data like clicks and opens. We're currently building a content discovery app and are looking to bring on a few Ember developers. We're pretty flexible, both part-time and full-time or contract basis. If any of you guys are interested, come over and talk to me here, or you can give it a little more shot. You can send me an email. My email is ralph@vesterly.com. It's Vesterly with a V, V-E-S-T-O-R-L-Y. And our CTO is not here yet. He'll be here in a little bit. His name is Arthur Beer. So anyways, come talk to us or check us out. It's Vesterly, and again, my name is Ralph. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you, Ralph. Other announcements? Anybody else hiring or looking for work? You look like you want to say something.
Hi, my name is Travis Kaufman. I'm actually not hiring, but I'm just started a startup with no name and we're building an app that isn't built yet, but we're looking to use Ember to develop a mobile web application. So if anybody has any experience in doing something like that, I'd love to talk to you and just pick your brain a little bit about it. And yeah, so just come find me and we're sure.
You can talk to me. You can talk to Dr. Jonathan is in the back as well. Anybody else want to volunteer? Built mobile stuff with Ember? Cool. Great. Thank you. Awesome. Great. Any other announcements?
I'll just chime in that I'm Gaurav Manjal. I'm a front-end web developer with Booker Software. We're looking for more front-end web developers, both mobile and traditional desktop-based. We use Ember with .NET. I know that scares a few of you, but if you're interested, let me know and come over. I'll give you my card. So Booker Software, we sell software as a service that allows people to schedule appointments with small businesses online, as well as having those small businesses have their own little calendar that they can see all the appointments and schedule their own. And we integrate point of sale, marketing, and all kinds of extra features into that.
Cool. Good stuff. And Booker, if you remember, if you were at the September meetup last year, Booker hosted and they did a great job in the space downtown. Cool. Any other announcements before we get started? Yes, Jason.
Hi, Jason Weber. I'm looking to recruit at S&P Capital IQ. It's a financial data and analytics website. We also do .NET and Ember development. If anyone's interested, come find me. I can give you a card or more information. Thanks.
Also, if you're full office.
Yes, newly remodeled.
Yes, probably one of the best views in Manhattan that I've experienced from Jason's desk. Cool. So I wanted to just try to pull up Meetup, and then remember that Meetup is under DDoS attack tonight. It's not going to be going smoothly. But what I do want to tell all of you is that our next meetup is March 27th. It's also a Thursday night. We are going to have Taras Minkowski, who is, you may know on Twitter as Ember Sherpa, to talk about how to learn Ember, which I think will be both relevant to those of you in the group who are learning, but also those of us who teach regularly to get some kind of beginner's perspective about how to teach Ember. And we'll fill out the talk schedule as well. We're going to do a benchmarking talk from Alex Tardian. And if you have something that you're interested in contributing to that meetup or a future meetup, definitely talk to me. I want to thank our sponsors, Pivotal Labs, who, despite making a few mistakes tonight, has been an incredible host to us over the last year and a half plus, and really went above and beyond in opening this space up, which they usually don't do, and ordering pizza, even though I didn't have it earlier. So we really do appreciate Pivotal hosting us. And then Yap Labs is my company. We do Ember training and consulting, as well as some of our own products. So if you are interested in getting some help with your team, feel free to talk to me afterwards. With that, really excited to introduce Corey to talk about controllers. Cool. Oh yeah, we have to figure out it in the lights.
Oh yeah, right. Over here. I think over there, right?
Should we try to make this picture bigger?
Is that readable?
Yeah, there's turn off flux.
It might cut off.
You turn off flux.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Turn off flux. Fall asleep. Oh.
There you go. I should leave it out.
Okay. Can you guys at the back hear me? Raise your hand if you can. Yeah. Okay.
Speak
Yeah.
louder.
I brought a beer. It's a lubricated voice. Yeah, I'm gonna do a lot of live coding, so I think I'll actually sit.
Then you're gonna have to talk
Really go. Okay. All right. Yeah, my name's Corey Forsyth, and I've been doing some Ember training also lately, and one of the things I've noticed with people is sort of people getting started with Ember, especially sort of confusion between the way the object controller and the normal controller work, and how the route hooks into that, and how to set up the model property and stuff like that. So that's sort of what inspired this, and it's aimed at people who are newer to the framework, but hopefully also try to break down some of the concepts I hope is interesting to everybody, whatever your experience level. So to start out with, we just have a basic JS bin, EmberJS template there. We're going to remove a bunch of extraneous stuff. So we're not going to use the router, the index route, hide the CSS tab. I'm going to clean up this application template. I'm going to remove the index template altogether, just so I can put it over on the JavaScript side here.
Want bigger?
Yeah, bigger. Better?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Cool. Yeah, so now everything's just in the JavaScript template here. That's the only reason I'm moving the index template over. So in Ember, whenever you're rendering a template onto the screen, the default context for it is the controller that's backing it. And you see here we've got a very basic template being rendered onto the screen, and it's not turning out anything for the user property. That's because that property doesn't exist on the generated index controller, so I'll just generate that. And if I give it a user property, okay, so now we're rendering some stuff onto the screen. The property user is being read, the template's asking its controller for it. The controller is giving it a property. We can do slightly more complicated properties. We can do more complicated properties also. They don't have to be just simple strings, they can be the results of functions, which allows us to use some more logic. If we're doing that, we have to add this property call. So we'll just return hello. And there's a slightly more complicated property being read out to the template from the controller. The point of doing this is so that we can have a little logic in our properties, and so I'll add I'll make it dependent on whether this fancy property is true or false. And since his fancy, before I go too further, Ember best practice, it's an anti-pattern not to do this. You want to declare your dependent key, and I'll show why in a little bit. But the property is still hello because is fancy is not defined anywhere on this controller, so it's falsy. And if I set that to true, then we see that now it's switched over and it's showing us the result of the property. And likewise, in our template, we are showing the results of property values from the controller, but we also, it's a two-way binding, so things that happen in the template will also go back into the controller. And so, let's see. Okay, so now we've got this checkbox that is bound to the is fancy property. If we click it, it will change what is displayed, but it'll also bubble up and change that is fancy property on the controller, which will cause the greeting to change also. So you can see we can sort of bounce that back and forth. And I said before we need to declare this dependent key. What happens if we don't do that is it just never changes. And that dependent key is there to tell Ember that it should recalculate the greeting property next time it's asked for it. Okay. So yeah, we're showing information about a user here. Let's sort of pull that user out into a model that we'll call our user, and we'll give him a name. And now instead of just setting the user's name here, we're going to set the user model onto the controller like that. And we lost our template working properly, and that's because it's asking for a user property, which is now an object. So we just say user.name, and again we see the name. Okay. Actually, and since we sort of went over the properties stuff, I'm going to simplify our template again. Just sort of make this complicated to get this in. Okay. So now we're really just showing information about this user in the template. So the next thing we want to do is, instead of, this is not really an Ember best practice to just sort of like throw these models onto your controller in their definition. We're going to use Ember's routing system to set the model on the controller. And the Ember route, so before our index route was being implicitly generated by Ember, and now we're going to explicitly define it and sort of set some things. So all Ember routes have this model hook, and you can return, any value you return here is going to be the model that the controller uses. And they also have a setup controller hook that takes as its property a controller and the model. Model is the output of this model function. And then you can do whatever you want with them. And so we'll just set the controller's model property to, actually we'll set its user property to be used. Sorry, to the model. All right, I'm getting ahead of myself. But yeah, what I wanted to do is we'll just call this the model instead. And in fact, we're going to get rid of it from this controller altogether for the time being. And we'll set its model property to the model, okay? And now in our template, we're referencing the user, so we're going to switch that over also to the model, okay? So now we're sort of back where we were. We've got a model that's being fed in through the route. We're displaying that model's property in the template, its name property. Yeah, okay, so now I'll do something that hopefully is a little bit surprising or very familiar if you've used Ember a lot. I'm going to just delete this setup control altogether, and we'll watch it break. But no, it actually didn't break. You might wonder why, and that's because the default behavior in Ember is to set the output of this model hook onto the controller as its model property. So it's doing the same thing implicitly that we just did explicitly, and I'll show you the code for that. Right here. So this is the controller setup, the setup controller hook in the controller. Can you make it bigger? Oh yeah. Is that better? Bigger. Okay. Yeah, so you can see it did basically exactly what we're just doing. So I'm trying to sort of like demystify some of the Ember magic. So we can let it do its default behavior. Context here is just going to be the value that came out of that model hook. Okay. All right, so the next thing is, oh, and I can also prove to you that the controller has the model property by, why am I not need the arrow from JSPin? I want to open it in a new window. I don't have that option. Sorry? Okay. Yeah, I lost it.
You can get the, if you click the,
I think, you know, I'll skip it for the time being, but I was going to show how the Ember Inspector works. I'll see if I can run it in this template.
Can't point to an iframe.
Yeah, no. Okay. Yeah, I don't know why.
Are you on the network?
I am, yeah.
it says it's saving, but it's not working,
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
You would have a URL. It's like a different URL. See.
Okay. Might be in a little bit of trouble. Can't say it.
Do you want to just copy this and try
Yeah.
and what you have? Did anybody put a curse on us tonight? I'm just curious.
Oh, I'm on the wrong network. Okay. What's the pivotal guess?
Dual works.
Okay.
Also the password.
Okay, I'm back. Okay.
GSP.
Okay. All right, sorry about that interlude. Yeah, so here's the Ember Inspector, which if you, like, at any level of Ember knowledge, it's incredibly handy and useful. You can just sort of tab over. Bigger. Oh, I can't make this text
You
any
can, if you
bigger.
click the console and hit Command plus.
Oh, thanks, okay. Okay, cool, yeah, so this shows the view tree, and if we hover over our index, we can see that it's using the app index controller, and there's its model showing up right there for you. So I can basically prove that it's being set, even though we know it is from the template. You can click on the controller also and go down. its property. And here you'll see it actually has the content. It's showing that its content is set to our user model. And if you look a little bit further, you can see that the model there is also the same thing. And so maybe it's a little bit weird that the content and the content is showing up here as set to that, but the model below. The calculator means it's a computed property, and this is another part of Ember that I have found confusing in the past.
We're going to fix it.
Okay. But if you wonder why in some places it's referred to as content, the others as model, you can use whichever you want, because here in the controller mixin you can see that it's aliased. Model is aliased to content, so they are interchangeable. And in the documentation, sometimes they use one way, sometimes the other way. Okay, so go back. All right. Okay, so yeah, so now we're showing information here. Let's give this user an age too. Okay, so now we have a template now with the controller, and we're showing information about a model, and this is the perfect opportunity to segue into using an object controller, because all we're doing here at the moment is just showing properties off of our model. So I'll switch over to an object controller, and immediately nothing changes. It's because there's nothing, an object controller is just an extension of the normal controller. It's still getting its model properties set by the route and so on. We're still reading it off as model. But the thing we can do now is just remove these model prefaces altogether, and it's still working. And that's because that's sort of the core thing that the object controller does. It proxies information lookups back to the model that is behind it. So the template is basically saying, I want to get the age from context, which is the controller. The controller doesn't have an age property, and so it asks its model for it. And it starts by looking on itself for those properties. So I'll show you if we give it its own name, it will supersede the one that's displayed in the template. So in this case, since it does have that property, it will not proxy it back to its model. Yeah, so that's the basics of the object controller. I'll remove that name property, and then I'll do something, hopefully it's also still surprising. I'm just going to delete this altogether and watch it break. Because if it doesn't break, yeah. Why is, see, we're not even referencing model.name here. Why is it still showing us the correct values? That's because when Ember generates a controller for you, it will automatically make it an object controller. So Ember is going to generate a controller for you and set this model, the value of the model onto it, as we saw before. And the type of controller it generates is going to be based on what this model is. I'll show the code for that. So it's, there's some container stuff here that's sort of out of scope of what I'm talking about, but it basically looks at this context, which is the output of the model. If it's an array, it's going to make an array controller. If the context exists at all, it's going to make an object controller, and that's the case that we're in now. So it creates this object controller, and the proxying through values still continues to work the same way it did before. And then to sort of top it all off, I will bring back the index controller, and I need to make sure it's the right kind of controller again this time. And I am going to give it its own property. I'm going to give it back the greeting. Okay, so now you can see we're sort of like, we're mixing the two. We're showing properties on the controller into the template, and they're continue to be bound.
And greeting to the template.
Oh, thanks, yeah. And they're bound to the controller, and they can change its properties and watch the things change. But we're still reading back to the model, and this is sort of the nice, elegant simplicity that you get in Ember a lot, that I really like, which is that it's a really good separation of concerns. The model shouldn't need to know where you are or how you want to greet it. It is concerned with its name and age, and those shouldn't depend on any sort of transient state of the controller. The controller is responsible for maintaining the state of whatever else that might be going on for the user. So that's it, and I'm open for questions now. Yeah, I don't know if you this is me. That's me on Twitter if you have questions.
Questions for Corey, and we're gonna, since we don't have mics tonight, I'm gonna ask Corey to repeat.
Sure.
Or I can repeat the question too. Dennis?
So as in my view, I try to access a model's property and it is null. Why is
Right.
that?
Yeah. So
Can you repeat the question?
yeah, he said in his view, he sometimes tries to access a model's property and finds that it's null. And the reason, do you mean you're trying to access a property on the view?
Like there's some, in my template I do curly brackets, name for example, and name comes up, but in my view I want to do some logic around name. I expect name just get name to give me something, but it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, so the view's got some property called name that you want to show in your template, and so you just do the curly brackets name, but there's nothing there. And that's because the context for the template is the controller, not the view, but the controller has I believe it has access to the view as a property, so you can, inside your template, you just say view dot, and then view dot name in this case, and it will read it through the controller's view property and then read the name on it.
So it's actually a view keyword that the template has access
Oh, okay,
to, so
okay.
it's going directly to the view.
Okay. Yeah.
So I have a question about the dot property method that's on the function. So are you guys extending window.function.prototype, or are you like injecting your own, like are you like doing some black magic and creating like?
This is extending the function prototype.
Yeah. So the question was, when we did dot property on a function, is that happening because Ember is extending the JavaScript's function prototype? And the answer is
Yes.
That's actually a flag you can turn off if you don't like that behavior. Then you would do ember.compute it and pass it to function. And then you can change dot property.
So there are a few. It's pretty rare, but there are a few other JavaScript libraries that can collide with some of the prototype extensions, as you may know. And so Ember can run without doing any types of prototype extensions. They're quite nice, so I usually run with them on. But any other questions for Corey? Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much, Corey. I love that stuff. So while our next speaker is getting set up, the R meetup over there had a sponsor, and the sponsor was the Vegetarian Food Festival. I said booze because it rhymes with booze, because they're also promoting the Better Booze Festival. So if you're interested in either vegetarian food or booze, come up and grab one of these. But in addition to that, that's not the exciting part. The exciting part is that I'm giving away 2 tickets to the Vegetarian Food Festival, which is, let me see when, it is March 1st and 2nd here in Chelsea. It's actually in the same space where Goruko is, if you've ever been to Goruko, I think. I'm going to ask an Ember trivia question, and the first person to get it wins, so make sure you want to go to the Vegetarian Food Festival.
Or a friend.
Or have a friend who would like to go. Let's see, we'll base it on related to controllers. So in Corey's talk, he talked about the regular old Ember controller as well as Ember.ObjectController. There's another subclass of controller that you will commonly run into in Ember. What is it? Oh, you can't call out. I can't call out the winner. Raise your hands. Up, first hand up. Array controller is correct. All right, take this and I'll give you your email address. And I'll get you a winner. Okay. Next trivia question. You're going to raise your hands, right? Okay. Let me think. Okay, in a standardly configured Ember run loop, the last queue is named this. Alex, oh wait, sorry, hold it out in the back.
Will destroy?
Close. Should we accept it?
I think yes.
Judges, the actual answer is destroy, but you're very close, so we're going to give it to you. I'm going to give you one of these, and you're going to give me your email address so I can send you the or I can get them to send you this. Okay. So find you before you go, give you an email. Okay. This should be fun, Vegetarian Food Festival. I am vegetarian, in fact. Well, it's in secret. So, as you may know, Vine is one of the kind of quintessential mobile-first success stories. And there are obviously more and more mobile-first companies, and as these companies, gain some traction and decide, okay, we need a website, what are they going to do to build it? And so, to answer that question and tell us how it went, the team of one who built a beautiful site for Vine, Janessa and Dan.
That's a lofty question. I'm not sure I can answer it. This is just me with, Anyways, I'll get into it. Anyways, so building Vine code, that's me. It's rather small, unfortunately. It's created by Janessa at Jandet on Twitter, if you're interested. Yell. Yes. Okay, yes. I will yell. So, October 21st of last year was my first day at Vine, and I transferred over from the Twitter New York office. So basically a new job, essentially, a completely different product. And the first thing they tell me is, we want to ship a new web experience by the end of the year. And I'm like, calculating in my head, I'm like, oh, so that's 2 months, and you want a full-featured website in 2 months. And I'm like, okay, great. So just to kind of give you an idea of the scope that ended up happening, and in real software development, we know that when people tell you this and then they have a list of features they want, a scoping battle ensues, where a lot of people are like, but we want all these features. I'm like, I can't build this in 2 months. So eventually, as you will see if you use Vine code right now, it's just user profiles and also a home feed, and you can see, of course, individual vines, which is already there. And so I was going through this, and I chose to use Ember AppKit and Ember, and I'll get into the reasons why I ended up choosing that. But in terms of scope, what ended up happening is I had about 2 months. It was 1 month of learning and building sort of about the framework and the architecture that kind of supports the whole thing. Like, oh my gosh, I got a timeline of posts finally rendering in Ember that's like same code. And then it was about 2 weeks of actually building out features, meaning like the profile and settings and everything. And 2 weeks of making the player not crash and work across browsers in a sane way, and a lot of design iterations where people kept changing their mind. So, probably this is a story that a lot of you have seen or have experienced, because that's sort of the reality of software development when it comes to a real company with goals. So, why Ember? I'll go through this and then I'll actually show you Vine so you can get an idea of what I'll be showing you and talking about. But for me, it sort of made a lot of sense because I've had experience a while back using Backbone, and I thought it would really make sense to make it a single-page app, because they were talking to me about all of these things they wanted to do, like when you move from this page to this page, I want the color here to like expand and like flush into the top, and I'm like, well, you can't do that unless you can control your transitions. So I was like, okay, that seems like a really obvious choice. And also, of course, the things that people always say, you get control over the UX, as I said. Also, just to be able to control the speed, as long as you're not like loading up 2 megabytes of JavaScript at first, and just making it really responsive and controlling that experience was really important to find. It was a classic multi-page, single-page app, which I think Ember has really handled well and thought about deeply and how to handle that, and sort of how it sets up its routes and controllers and views and stuff like that really aims towards that model. So it seemed to make a lot of sense. And this is me. I didn't know anything about Ember really, except for reading up on some of the docs and like poking at the demos. But it seemed to be that way. We already had a full API because we have iOS and Android app, and they just pool data. So that just makes sense for doing a client-side app like that. And also, everyone kept telling me that Ember is like an evolved form of Backbone, where all the things that I had customized in my past startup that I used Backbone with and like extended this to do this, I was like reading on Ember, and I'm like, oh, they actually thought about that the same way I did, and they're trying to pull solutions that people have come up with into an actual framework that already does it for you, which was good. A lot of less repetition and manual work. So I kind of imagined it that way. That was Backbone. It was really cool when I started using it, but now we have like Ember, which is oh, before that, okay, let's see if I can pull up my browser using this weird setup that I've done. Okay, so let's actually difficult. Log out. Maybe I should mirror my screen after all. So, yeah, that's a little bit better.
I love this so much.
So, just to kind of show you, first of all, so you know later when I talk about parts of it, and I'll keep going back to this to show you what I'm talking about. This is Vine in its current form, so we have the login screen and everything, and you'll see, oh my god, that is the best Vine ever, but besides that, it's my favorite Vine of all time. I'm so happy that we see that like 10 times if you just stay on like the page. It's like the best thing ever. So hopefully nobody has posted something embarrassing on my feed for this demo, but you'll see that there's like this, of course, timelines and you know what would make sense as actions in like and Revine, and we have this automatic scroll play where by the viewport, much like the app, if you use it, they want you to be able to have it autoplay. And you know we have a profile as well that kind of has some more things here, and an individual post page, which at this width is not that's width. That's fine. So I'll get into a little bit more detail as I go on the different parts of this. Okay, so one of the things that I found really useful were routers and the Ember router and how it has resource. Actually, I want to show you that. So you'll see that here, there's something called TV mode, where you have a feed mode, but you also have this, where it autoplays. It's the same, pulling from the same data, but it's a completely different sort of playback experience. There's no looping, it's continual, and it keeps going, it paginates ahead of time, so it's seamless and that sort of thing. My follows are very catered towards cute animals. You can maybe come to compare. So just to show you some code snippets of how this was really useful and how it really only took this much code to make that happen in a seamless way. I didn't want them to be going into TV mode, which they wanted as a separate route, so you could hit TV mode directly by adding /TV, but I didn't want to like re-pull the timeline if you're switching back and forth every time. So what I have here is in my router, instead of making it just route user and then route user TV, I have it as a resource. This is for the user, which is useful anyways because I'm using the same user data for that sidebar too. But not to get too sidetracked from my main point, is then for the user index route and the user TV route, I'm just pulling from the model that I already pulled for the user, and there's this model for user, and pulling that timeline. And actually, this might not be the best example, but I'm reusing the user information, which I don't have to re-pull every time. And I use that for all of my timelines, which is really useful. And for another thing that I thought was cool was the current user controller. What this controls on the Vine website is just this little thing right here. I wanted it to refresh every time that the session changed, either on logout or login, to really reflect the correct information. For instance, this should go to the current user's profile, and etc. And if you want to show an avatar, you can do that as well. So all of this is, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of ways that maybe I could do things better. So if you do see ways to improve on this, because I like wrote this in a blaze, you could totally talk to me afterwards and be like, maybe it's better if you did it this way, and then work on that. So grain of salt. But so what I did is I have the session being injected into every model, controller, view, all of the usuals, and I'm just binding with an observer to session.userID, and when that changes, it makes a call out to get all of the user information that I need, and it sets its content. And basically, that's how it's keeping it up to date, and that's all it took. Also, I have a graceful catch at the end because I know exactly which error codes mean their session has expired and other things, so I could recover gracefully and And instead of just showing the error page like, oh, you did something wrong, but they didn't, so I just send them back into the homepage experience and logged out experience. So it only took like, what, 10 lines of code, and that's managing my entire current user page, which is great. Another great thing is I can...
Sorry, quick question. The homepage that you showed, is that part of the Ember app, or is that a separate? It is.
It is. So in the background, that's another timeline controller with controller items.
Even when you're not logged in. Cool.
Yeah. Oh, nice thing about this too is if you ever need to access the current user data, you just include it in your needs, and another controller needs current user, and you can kind of pull all of that in and work with that data really easily whenever you need it. So that was really useful. Repeated elements. So, I mean, one of the best things that Ember has done for me is being able to look at all these mocks, and there are Vine posts everywhere, and they all really need the same computed properties, like, you know, processing this thumbnail URL into whatever I need, or, you know, making the description a certain way, or all sorts of things like that. It's really the same thing. They often have the same actions. You want to be able to like, rebind, share, all of those sorts of things, and it was nice because all of that is encapsulated in one file, which is the post controller, with some view stuff, etc. But that aside,
Can you keep yelling?
yelling more?
Yeah.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? I hope so. So, for example, my timeline controller, you just set item controller post, and that knows that when it's an array controller, for each item to use the post controller to have all this data available, have the actions lined up and actions wired up and everything. So this took care of things like this, just being able to set item controller post takes care of all feed timelines, which is including the user. It has this in there, the home feed, including the TV mode timelines, which is that full screen view that I showed you, and also the home page, as I was just saying, there you see those vines playing continuously in the background. That's basically a variation of my TV mode timeline. I could reuse a lot of code that way. And eventually, for instance, when they want search or that sort of thing, if you're showing search results of posts, you can do the same thing, which is great. Like, I don't even have to do an extend and like add things. Everything's just there for me, which is great. So that was extra useful. So this was an interesting one. How does Vine actually play videos? At first, when I was building it, I'm like, oh yeah, so you put a video element in every single post, and then you just run with it and you control it. I quickly found that on Chrome, if you try to put more than about 20 video elements on a page and use them in any sort of complex way, it crashes consistently. So besides me filing a bug on Chromium, I didn't have time to wait for them to fix this for me. So I was like, crap, what the hell do I do? Like, I need to figure out how to get these videos playing and have this like fancy scroll play stuff and TV mode and all of this sort of stuff, but also have it not crash Chrome because that's a huge part of the market. So let's take a look at, oh, I already showed you how the scroll play works and all of that. So if you'll look at the scroll play, you'll notice that at no point is more than one vine ever playing, which makes sense because you don't want the audio to be overlapping and that would be super weird. So I have just one thing that sort of sits on the top level called the Vine controller. And I was like, forget trying to render multiple videos because this is going to crash and all these other issues with video on the web, which I can get into if you're really interested in hearing my pain stories. So what happens is this Vine controller basically just renders one video element. And there's only ever one video element that ever exists on VineCo. And so as posts are rendered on a timeline, it registers up with the Vine controller saying, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And it sort of keeps track of it in this computed array by what's towards the top and whatever for efficiency reasons, etc. And as your viewport goes in, this is me scrolling, and that's your web window. It has a binding on it that's a scroll binding, and it basically finds which one is the top one in the viewport. Because if you have a tall window, it could be multiple. It says, which one should I be playing? And it says action play. And with that Vine stored element that I have stored, and all it basically does is it takes that video element and reparents it into the post, and it resets the source to whatever the actual video source is, and it reparents it, it says play. And that worked really well. And it also stores inside which one is playing so that I can guarantee that it's never overlapping. And for other reasons, if you need to access the current playing vine, which does happen in multiple cases, I can just pull it from that, which is great. So that ended up being our solution. I've had interesting debates about how this could be refactored to be more Vue-y and like etc. There's lots of ways to do it, but this is what we have now. That worked well. And the great thing was just using Ember for this, it was not hard to do at all. And because it's only one controller, I can encapsulate all the weirdness, like mobile fixes. If Firefox on OS and using Flash, do this. Because the poster is broken on Chrome, do this, And all those sorts of weirdness, it's all just encapsulated into this file, and I can make it as neat as I possibly can with all of those weird video fixes. So I thought that was an Ember success for me, because this was not difficult to put together. I refactored this in like less than a day. So things that I wish I knew about earlier or better for Ember. This might be just good tips for people starting out, or people can help me know these things better if you already know about them. So things that I found later were useful and I wish I had known earlier. First one is the Ember run loop. People have told me that I don't really need to know about it, it's just kind of used and it makes things faster, but you don't have to know about it. But for me, understanding things and for weird use cases like after I fake success for a comment, I wanted to scroll down, but only after the comment's been rendered and appended. Weird stuff like that. I wish I had just kind of had an idea of just the basics of what are the phases of the Ember run loop, where do the components of Ember, like where are they falling inside this run loop and when things are happening where, and just the order of things, I think would have been really helpful for me. Maybe learning how to do Ember better earlier and faster. Same thing, it's related lifecycle hooks, just understanding which of these lifecycle hooks might be removed later and which one of them are staying, which one of them happened where in route. Routes were pretty clear, but a few other things like will transition, activate, deactivate, it wasn't super clear, and I think clarifying that earlier would have helped me make less mistakes as I was starting out. Another thing, because I'm using Ember AppKit actually, because I don't like globals and I like having lots of little files and little folders. There's a ton of little files and little folders now. But I wish I had known more about register and inject, especially for that, like figuring out how to inject my service objects into things and the session and that sort of thing, and how to do that and make it work better with the resolver and that sort of thing. So I did a lot of Googling, and there actually wasn't very much available. I found like one good article and then like figured it out. So that would have been helpful. Also, testing best practices. It took me a while to really get my tests up and figure out fixtures. Also, I'm not using Ember data because we don't have a conventional API by a far cry. So I was like, forget it. But just any tips, if people have tips for me for testing. I'm starting to build up our test suite now that I have some time. So.
Are you using just plain old vanilla JavaScript objects, or are you using Ember objects? When you say
For,
you're using Ember data.
For what?
You said
The
you're not
service
using Ember,
objects?
yeah.
Oh, like I am using Ember objects, but in the I did that just because. But thinking about it now, it's not necessary, probably. But since I'm now injecting them in a way where I have this like service loader, where if it's in testing mode, it's loading from available fixtures. But if the available fixtures aren't there, it's loading from the regular service object. So in this case, it's useful that I have Ember objects because I'm injecting them in all sorts of things. But before that, there was no particularly compelling reason. It's not like I'm setting things or doing any bindings. It's literally like, user service timeline or whatever, and it just makes a request and it comes back. I kind of hacked my own API.request method though that like wraps everything nicely in a promise, an Ember RSVP promise, just so it works well and I can use the same conventions. But besides that, it's just you could totally use a regular object, and with Ember AppKit with the like ES6 modules thing that they're doing, you can just import it and not even do this register thing. So, yeah, so if you have tips or advice on any of these items, I would appreciate advice because I'm still working through a lot of these. And, and that's it. So there's me. There's also my Vine. I can't say that my Vines are that interesting yet, but I'm working on it. So if you want to check out the stupid things that I take videos of.
Cool. I'm looking to expand my team of 1 to 2, and we're looking for very smart people. So anybody looking or interested, possibly, not just Ember background, but just smart. Cool. Awesome.
Just throwing that out
Take
there.
a few questions.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you were learning Ember, what was the biggest pain point you had for the Ember team to learn, hey, maybe we should fix this right now?
For the Ember team?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, the biggest pain point wasn't because of the Ember team. The biggest pain point probably was because I came from a backbone background, and like some of the paradigms and how they represent things conceptually conflict with how Ember conceptually orders things. So that was like a little paradigm shift where I had to like force my brain in a different direction. I worked with Steph on some testing bug that was not like resetting the app or something, but that was just me like figuring out why I couldn't have multiple assertions in like a integration test. I guess that was kind of a pain point. I mean, some of these things like that on my last slide, just further documentation or just ways to learn about those things early on, and that would help with understanding conventions and why the conventions exist in a certain way. I don't know. I guess those things that I listed are some of the bigger ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions over here?
Sorry, so you were talking before about the registering and injection. I don't have much experience with the Ember app, but so you're using needs, you said, to do the injection for the session all over the place?
Oh, not necessarily needs. So I'm.
Should we repeat the
Oh,
question?
sorry. It was a question about register and inject and how I was using that with my session to basically make it available everywhere. So it's an app initializer where I'm doing this, and I'm registering a session type that I can inject everywhere, and then I'm basically running through all of my model, view, controllers, and whatever else I might be missing, and you can call inject and inject an instance of that into everything. And then after that initializer runs, which is right at the beginning, in all of your controllers, you can just do this.session. So I can do a lot of things like this.session is authenticated, like if it is, do this, otherwise do other things in my routes and stuff like that for redirects.
There was a
From services? Is that different from
Oh, services I did in a similar way because I wrote this service loader, which is okay, but could be better. But and I have that available in all of them, on all of my objects too. So now I can do, instead of like import all of these things and then user service, I'm just doing this.getServices.user, and that will select either fixtures if I'm in testing mode and they're available, or my regular service object. So it's because I wrote this service loader that I wanted it to be available everywhere. Plus, I mean, having your services available everywhere is not that thing, and I just didn't get around to it until recently.
There was a talk at last month's meetup by Matthew Beal about the resolver, which would be a great one to check out if you want to know more about that. And thanks to Lee, that stuff is all up on YouTube under the Ember NYC channel. Other questions?
Could you talk a bit more about what you're doing in terms of testing? It's a pretty
I
wild
have,
world,
like,
isn't it?
I mean, honestly, they're still pushing me for features, so you can imagine the amount of time I have for testing, which is not much right now. So right now I have like really basic tests, and it took me a while just to kind of get them working with fixtures and like, you know, all the boilerplate that comes with testing. So I have like a test for the post controller right now, like just checking all the actions and stuff, like likes work, comments work, blah, blah, blah. But in a few acceptance tests for some of our bigger things, but beyond that, not much. I'm struggling with how do I mock this really complicated player that I have with a video that has an ended event and a can play event. Like I'm struggling with some of those things, which I think are separate from Ember testing, but like how do you mock video on the web and have it integration test, you know, and things like that. So don't have much yet, so I can keep you guys posted as I struggle further into this though.
And what frameworks and test runners?
I mean, I'm using Ember testing. for mocking and stuff, I'm using sign-on for better for worse. People are very opinionated about this. I've heard. I thought it was like, whatever, it's there, I'll just use it. So I'm just using Ember testing of the Q-unit stuff. Nothing out of the ordinary. Yeah.
Question over here.
In the beginning, you said that they did the mobile first, and then you came in and did the web part of this. Has anybody from the mobile community learned something that could be brought back to the mobile side based on what you've done?
The question is, if I understand this correctly, because the app existed for so long before they actually built out a website, what could people from the mobile community maybe learn from this going back into the mobile community? Well, I think it's unfair that we didn't have a website. I mean, why is everything mobile first without mobile web?
Is TV mode a thing on the iPhone app?
No. So, I mean, maybe people who are approaching companies that are mobile first forget that websites have a lot of potential, not only because on iOS you don't have to submit it to someone to approve before you deploy, you just deploy. But we have, I mean, web has a lot more screen real estate, and I think the company's really learning that we're, number one, a great experimentation platform for different experiences like TV mode, and also it's just there's more screen real estate to play with, and it's easy to deploy, and then just try things out. So having a website is important because you can, try out new concepts that you not necessarily want to put in your final iOS build, and then have to unput if you feel like it's not working. So I wish people would build websites.
Yeah, sharing.
Oh yeah, sharing. Well, that's why they had any sort of website in the first place, which is it only rendered individual post pages and a splash page that says download the app. So at least they understood that part. But yes.
What about if your code recognize each browser from Internet Explorer to Chrome to Safari, it recognizes and what is the performance of each browser?
So I think the question is, across browsers, what are the differences in performance for Vine, and what did I notice? Most of these have nothing to do with Ember. Most of these have to do with HTML5 video and us only having H.264 available for videos, and the inconsistencies in implementation of HTML5 video. So things like, oh my gosh, Firefox on only OS X will render Flash for H.264 because they don't support it, or just because I'm using a polyfill, they'll try to use Flash. But they won't support it with HTML5 video. So having Flash that was heavier and you feel the latency, things like there was a bug on Chrome with like the poster. If you have preload and a poster, it just renders black and doesn't play. So I'm faking every thumbnail that happens here, having to control ended events because the Flash player wouldn't loop properly. And I was like, crap, this is Vine. You can't not loop on Vine. I was like, this is killing your product. So I'm now manually looping everything, also for mobile compatibility, like mobile browsers, Android native browsers were crazy, and everything's slower on mobile because, over connections and that sort of thing. And so the differences were because of HTML5 video. Mobile is really slow. Really old Android browsers are slow. Internet Explorer 9 and 10 actually performed great with HTML5 video. Firefox on OS X was a pain point, to say the least. And besides that, it's just dealing with the inconsistencies, and things have probably slowed down a bit because of all the fixes that I have, but you do at some point. The fun part of using video is stopped. The hard part is now. So that's just the reality of it, I guess.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much, Janessa. Very impressive effort for a single developer. Awesome site, and thank you for sharing. That's awesome. Cool. So I'm going to take a peek over across the way at our friends in our meetup and see how they're doing. I'm also really hoping for a knock on that door any minute with pizza arriving. So what I'd like to do is to take about 5 minutes now to stretch, use the facilities, introduce yourself to somebody that you don't know, and hopefully everything will just work out, and if not, we'll just keep on rolling with some good Ember content. Our next speaker doesn't need much of an introduction if you've been hanging around NYCRB or hanging around the internet.
Do I look dumb with
this gentleman's been involved in Ember since before it was Ember. I remember back in the Sprout Core days when they were running some contests for kind of community apps. There was an app that was pretty impressive. Was it a Twitter clone? Was that what you
Yeah,
Twitter clone. There's this Twitter clone built in Sprout Core 2.
Sprout Core 2, yeah.
Sprout Core 2, and I was like, damn, that's pretty good. And it turns out, that little did I know, this person would both become a friend, a member of the EmberJS core team, a regular speaker at Ember NYC, and just a great contributor to our community. So I'm really happy to welcome back to New York, Eric Bryn.
Thanks, Luke. Hello, everyone. So yeah, that was a great introduction. Much better than the pizza sales pitch earlier. But so my name's Eric. I'm here to talk about a project I've been working on for the last couple months with my good friends Alex Machnier and Chris Selden, who's a Yap employee and is over in Seattle. And then, of course, our good buddy Yehuda Katz, who kind of spearheaded the initial effort. And this project's called HTMLBars, and it's a really exciting project. How many people have heard of it? All right, we've got the hype machine going on full blast. Great. So, so yeah, HTMLBars is the future of Ember's templating, and I'm really excited to share my thoughts about it and teach you a little bit about how it works today. So, I'm Eric. This is my HTMLBars beard, so I'm going to shave this off once I finish it. It's the first time I've had a beard this long, so it's kind of nice. So I'm really, really lucky. I get to work with awesome companies that are using Ember, and I've been doing this for a couple years now. So companies like Netflix recently has decided to build their first Ember application, so I'm helping them. Mozilla, Square, I'm here actually thanks to Square. They've got a new New York office. If you're looking for a job doing Ember, talk to the Square folks that are here. John and Lindsay right there. So I've been doing training with them this week. They're learning Ember here in New York. Zendesk, Zoho, and Live Nation. So they've been all great, great clients and have also helped support my open source work as well. So for example, Live Nation funded the initial work into Ember testing. So we have Ember testing thanks to them. Square has done a lot of list view was Square's contribution to the Ember community. Initially, the first version of it. Netflix is going to have a ton of cool open source coming out, and Zendesk actually directly gave me a bunch of free money to work on HTMLBars because they're really excited about it. So thanks very much to all of my clients who've been awesome. I'm a really lucky guy, and I'm loving every minute of this. So what is HTMLBars? It's a new templating library built on top of handlebars. And why is it good? Because it understands your markup. It can be really smart about how it does its job. And so here's an example. This is the canonical example. Alex talked a bit about HTMLBars at the last meetup, so I'm going to skip ahead. Who was here last when Alex spoke about it? All right, so actually less than half. So I'll go a little slower. So basically, right, we have this problem in Ember today where we have this non-ideal syntax. We have to use bindatter, class, foo or whatever in our templates. We can't just do the ideal syntax. And so with HTMLBars, we're going to get our ideal syntax finally, which is awesome. And the reason that we can't have this ideal syntax today in Ember is because handlebars is basically just fancy string interpolation. It doesn't understand that you're putting a curly inside of the opening tag or inside of an attribute definition, etc. So all that handlebars can do is just emit a string at the current position during the rendering process. So HTMLBars is really smart. It knows when you're putting a curly inside of an opening tag. It knows you're putting it inside of a class definition, and it has static text also declared. So it can do that concatenation for you when that property changes. And it also knows when it's used inside of a tag. And the other cool thing about HTMLBars is that it knows how to build DOM instead of big strings. And it turns out this is a massive performance win. And the cool thing for data binding is that we can hold on to references to those elements where you are putting those mustaches. So we have a really efficient way of doing data binding, and we get rid of all these metamorph script tags that are in the DOM today. So this is going to be huge. So this is like, you know, this is what we want, and this is what we wish we could have had from the beginning, but it's taken us a little while to get here, but the great thing is that it's coming soon. So we're able to rapidly clone these DOM, but basically these templates now just generate DOM fragments, and we're able to really efficiently deeply clone them. So in circumstances where you have an each loop, you know, the template is actually the same for each iteration. The only thing that's different is the pieces of it where there is dynamic content. So we're actually able to clone the row, basically this fragment here, we're able to clone that and just fill in just the bits that are dynamic and then append it to the DOM extremely efficiently. And it turns out this is going to be, we've been talking with the React guys. They've been really interested in our approach. The React guys being over at Facebook. In fact, I went and had lunch with them and chatted. They would love to have us use React in Ember, but it actually turns out what we're doing with HTMLBars is more efficient and better for our use cases. But we're definitely learning from each other in a lot of ways. They did some benchmarking, and they found out that actually HTMLBars is 30% faster than what they've been doing with inner HTML, which is cool. So today in Handlebars, we've got this DOM binding library called Metamorph, which is what manages the ranges of HTML in the DOM. You know, basically, right, when we do something, when we have a bar inside of a tag, you know, we've got these script tags to mark that area so that we know where to go and update it later. With HTMLBars, we're not going to have anything. HTMLBars is really smart about keeping track of where these mustaches are, and we actually don't even generate markers or anything. We actually track boundaries, and so we don't have to create these dummy nodes in the DOM only to like destroy or modify them later. So I actually want to show a quick example of what an HTMLBars template will kind of look like, source code wise. So let's see here. I can hide the sidebar. Sidebar. Okay, cool. So basically, the way that HTMLBars works is that we build, you know, in your template, you've got some HTML, right? HTMLBars has a simple HTML parser. So this is another kind of cool added benefit. We are going to, your compilations will fail if you have invalid HTML. So you're going to also get HTML validation for free, which is really cool as well. You might have seen, like, or you might have run into problems with data binding currently in Ember. When you have an invalid DOM structure, the browser like tries to guess what you meant, but it can screw up Ember's bindings. So anyways, basically we'll have parsed in the HTML, and we're going to know, like, okay, our template's got a p tag, it's got hello in it, and then it's going to append that hello, you know, text node into the p tag, and then we're going to append the p tag into the catch fragment. This is actually a bad template example. I copied and pasted it. This is kind of a bullshit example. Anyways, so the main point, though, is we actually build up this fragment once, and we cache it. So every subsequent execution of a HTMLBars template is just going to clone the fragment once. So we only have to do the work to actually build the structure once. And so that means that any nodes, we don't actually, the browser doesn't need to create JavaScript wrapper objects for DOM nodes, so except the first time. So every subsequent run, we only create wrapper objects, which are a costly thing to do, especially in Chrome. So we don't have to create those except for the elements that have mustaches in them. You know, so we can basically get the benefit of building DOM programmatically, but without the penalty of doing it every single template execution. And so then we, like I was mentioning before, we have this concept. So we're really smart about tracking boundaries and stuff. And so the idea is we have these things called placeholders, and they're kind of like, you could kind of think of them as DOM ranges, but what they are, they basically represent where a mustache is. So you can have placeholders for like, okay, I'm butt up against the opening tag, and there's a text node to the right of me, so the placeholder will be at like -1, 0 or whatever, right? To signify it's on the border. Or maybe it's in between two text nodes, so it's at 0, 1, and we'll inject it in between them. So there's also some other interesting stuff, like we do some optimizations where we need to, when you have mustaches deeply nested inside of a DOM structure, we need a quick way of getting straight to that without touching every node through the tree. And so we actually generate IDs for the elements that are parents of a mustache, and then they're deterministically generated, so we can actually just, when we're cloning, we can go and find, so I should explain, the cached fragment doesn't include any of the dynamic content because it's the kind of the template for every execution. So the placeholders here we build up based off of that template that doesn't have anything to do with mustaches. You know, it doesn't have any content related to the mustaches. The placeholders become our little DOM elements that we can just append child to, and then the text content or the arbitrary HTML content that's represented by a mustache can just get placed directly in there. And so what I was saying was the idea is we need to traverse the hierarchy to get to those nodes that we need to do the insertion into, rather than just calling like child node 0, child node 0, child node 0, child node 1, child node 0, whatever, to traverse the tree. We create an ID for the parent elements, and then we use that with query selector or get element by ID on old IE, and we can jump directly to without creating all those wrapper objects that I was telling you about, which in Chrome right now is extremely expensive. It can cause like 4-second GC pauses if you create a lot of DOM wrappers. If you're interested in that, I can talk more about it with you after the talk. So this is kind of, does this make sense? Is everybody kind of following what I mean? Like kind of the basic idea of what we're doing here? If you're interested in more details, the HTMLBars repo has an architecture.md that Alex wrote up. It's not fully complete and it's not totally up to date, but it gives you the general principles if you want to dive in a little more later. So the cool thing is that we're building HTMLBars to be generically usable just like handlebars was, right? So HTMLBars doesn't actually have the concept of data binding. It just exposes the hooks that if you cared about implementing data binding, you could build on top of it. And so we have this other project that we call Bound Templates.js, which is a layer on top of HTMLBars. So if you're using, you know, something like Backbone and you don't want data binding, or you just want to re-render every template across, you know, anytime a model property changes or whatever, you could still use HTMLBars just like you could use handlebars today. It's a drop-in replacement. You're going to get a better speed boost because our DOM building is much faster than the string building that we were doing before. So Ember is going to depend on bound templates for its data binding support, and also build on it a little bit more. And so, like I said, we're building this to be generic, and I expect HTMLBars to become as popular, if not more popular, than handlebars. And maybe we'll call it handlebars too. Who knows? And so, last but not least, performance. Like I've kind of been alluding to performance a lot. And part of the HTMLBars work, we kind of are using HTMLBars as a group term for describing a bunch of work that we've kind of wanted to be doing to Ember. And, you know, kind of the performance gurus, myself and Chris Selden, it's like finally Eric and Chris get to do all the work that we've wanted to do, you know, to the view layer and stuff to make it super, super fast. I do a lot of performance work. Chris does a lot of performance work, and I'm trying to put myself out of business because I'm tired of doing the same work over and over again. So, so there's a lot of work going into the Ember view layer as well. And we're focusing on every millisecond. I mean, I'm focusing on microseconds. The browsers aren't very, you know, everything's like the average of 0.00, but then I use Safari get call counts and actually like compute, like I take the self counts divided by the call counts and actually figure out how many microseconds everything is taking, because I'm trying to shave every microsecond even. So we're establishing this baseline. We've kind of got an idea now for like how fast can we actually make it? And then as from there, we know how fast it could possibly be with as bare bone of a feature set as possible. And we're tracking the cost of everything that we add back. You know, all the great features of the Ember View layer that you guys love, we're being very careful and making sure that nothing in particular hurts performance extremely. And another cool thing is we're flattening the call stack as well by avoiding recursion during view rendering. And so I don't know if you guys have ever tried to use the flame chart with Ember, but we're doing some work. This is one of Alex's famous Photoshops. So the plan is to basically, you know, start from the bare metal and layer features on while paying attention, really. You know? So the cool thing is, as well, is we're going to try to architect it so that if you are doing something really performance intensive, like rendering 100,000 things in a list, God help your users, but if you wanted to do that, in theory, you could opt out of features that might be costly, you know, so that you can really get a better, so you have an escape valve that isn't just like render it raw, you know, yourself. You don't, because I'll tell you, I've done this so many times, and once I can't use the action helper, I become extremely emo. So things like that are just so nice to have, and I don't want to give them up. And we're also working on animation as well. This is going to be, since we're dealing with elements, we're going to be able to pass in element to will insert element. So you'll be able to like position it off screen, and then on did insert element, you'll be able to animate it over and stuff. So this is really cool for animations. I'll answer that later for you. So I want to show off some teaser demos. You might have seen this one. This is kind of the most famous one. This is so this is an old thing. Like for me, this is so therapeutic because you know I've been working on Ember for almost 3 years now, and we got trolled by Jeremy Ashkenas of Backbone fame a couple years ago. It's only taken us a couple years to fire back, but we've had other things to worry about. So. You know, there's this famous kind of JS fiddle where he's like, bindings are slow. You don't need bindings. Just re-render. Backbone's fine. So here's Backbone, you know, spinning circles. Everybody's number one use case for a JavaScript MVC framework. So we're spinning circles, and we're doing it pretty quickly, right? We're doing it at about 8 milliseconds and 9 milliseconds per loop. And so just to give a baseline, like, here, the React guys kind of wrote like an implementation with nothing, like, wow, JavaScript, raw metal, 1.7 milliseconds per loop. So, you know, Backbone's pretty respectable, like maybe like, you know, 5x slower than writing it yourself. That's pretty good. And then there's React, which is, you know, well known for its performance. And here it is clocking in around 5 milliseconds per loop. So it's beaten Backbone, right? But it's still, you know, significantly slower than doing it yourself. And then, well, Ember plus experimental HTMLBars, I wonder how fast this is. This is about 2.7. So we will be the #1 JavaScript framework for spinning circles. I can guarantee you. So I wanna also show you another cool demo with experimental HTMLbar support. This is to do MVC, and this is actually an example that was built by Yahoo when they were evaluating Ember versus Angular. One of the things they were concerned about was performance, because they're using this on they chose Ember ultimately, which is really cool. Now, if you're in the ads division of Yahoo, it's a requirement. If you're going to build a single page app, you're going to use Ember. It's their standard now internally. So that's really cool. But they built up this example showing, you know, rendering performance of, you know, large lists. So this is like the thing we're known to be bad at, right? And so it's painful for me to see these things. So here's old Ember. I'm just going to refresh the page. I think we've got like 1,000 items in the to-do list. Oh no, hopefully my server's still working. All right, so it just re-rendered. If I open the console here, we're going to see It took 5, really? So it took like 3.4 seconds to render this long list. And so this is actually an old version of Ember too. This is like 1.0 RC6. So if I actually like, well, let's see, can I do this? If we used like Canary Ember, actually I should do live coding. Big mistake, buddy, big mistake. Let's use Canary, and let's just clock in and see how Ember's doing today. So, all right, great, that's the right URL. So, do I have this actually open? Nope. What? Oh yeah, I hid the sidebar, huh? Ember index. So here's like the local old version of Ember. Oh god, I'm gonna need like handlebars and everything, aren't I? How do I get handlebars easily? Live coding. Oh, come on, are you serious? Great, cool. jQuery should be alright, right? So let's see. So we've done a lot of performance work prior to HTMLBars. Oh, what? Did I? Oh, I shut it down. I didn't just background it. So here's modern Ember, hopefully. Great. 1.4. So we've actually made like 2x, if not greater, since 1.0 RC6 to Ember Canary now. So, well, what about Ember with HTMLBars, right? Let's give that a shot. So we're going to refresh here. And it's 429 milliseconds. So we're looking at about 3x on this example. So yeah, this is kind of the preliminary experimental benchmarking that we've been doing to kind of see how we work inside of. We've obviously been working kind of outside of Ember on the more micro library side, paying attention to performance at that level. But I wanted to put it into some actual Ember apps, hack it in, see how we fared. So I think, you know, for those of you who have been using Ember from day one, like, I think that Ember with HTMLBars is going to really feel like a whole new, fresh, smooth, you know, experience in your apps. And the great thing is that if we do our jobs well, you're going to just upgrade another point release, stable point release, and it's just going to work, and your app's going to be 3 times faster. I don't know. We'll see. So, yeah. So this is one of the benefits of building with a framework, right? You just get free wins because you chose the right horse in the race. So, also great news. We're going to enable you to do server-side rendering of your Ember apps. So this is going to come a little later than HTMLBars itself, but we've designed the whole system, and the view layer refactoring is going to enable you to basically just spin up Node on your server, load up your Ember app, and to-string it. So you'll be able to send a rendered version of your app out to the Googlebot. And if you're interested in using it for like speeding up like a fast boot type situation, you're going to be able to do that as well. But there's some constraints with this, right? Like you can choose, so we're building it to not be dependent upon any actual DOM implementation in Node, so you won't have to use something like JS DOM to do your rendering. And the way that's going to work is basically we have a fake DOM implementation that just builds up an object graph that, you know, is your DOM hierarchy, and just you call toString and it just goes through and toStrings everything, right? Really simple approach. If you're going to want to like do things like run jQuery code on the server, then you're going to need a DOM emulation layer, something like JS DOM. And our hope is to support both of these. So if you wanted to do that, you could, but you know, ideally, you don't. All right. Something about C++. No C++. Seems good. And we're dropping our jQuery dependency. So you're going to be able to use Ember now without having to use jQuery. You're probably going to want it. You know, you can also a little known fact is that with jQuery 2, they've got a custom build script. So you can actually build just the parts of jQuery that you want. And I think I've gotten a build down to like 3 or 4K with like, you know, the Ajax libraries and event delegation or whatever. But the idea is you're going to be able to run Ember now without jQuery as well, because we were using jQuery because it did a lot of this heavy work around fixing bad HTML structures. Like you can't just arbitrarily insert, you know, when you're doing DOM stuff, you can't just like put a div inside of a table. You know, you need to like generate like, or you can't even create you can't create an element and then just enter HTML just anything into it. It needs to be the right parent for the type of element that you're injecting into it. And jQuery did a lot of this stuff for us, and we depended on it previously. But with HTMLBars, since we're building all the DOM ourselves, we know what you're doing, and we can just do the right thing without needing jQuery to do that work for us. So yeah, that's all I got. So a little shameless self-promotion. If you need help with Ember, I am hireable. This is how I make my living, so please feel free to reach out tonight or email me here or get on me on Twitter or whatever, and we'll do some Q&A.
Awesome. I'm going to run the mic around so we get it all on YouTube for the folks at home.
Hi, so you mentioned two things. One is that you're going to validate our HTML.
Yes.
And the second thing was that it's going to be all compatible.
Yes, so if you have invalid HTML, yes. So I mean, that's a good point, I guess. But hopefully you're a good engineer and that's actually a feature, not a bug. So yeah, basically the idea behind the HTML validation, just to go into a little bit, is, you know, we are actually parsing the HTML, so the compiler doesn't do any of the crazy shit that the browser does by like try to fix, you know, like assume you're some GeoCities user from 1995 and like try to fix your bad DOM structure. We will just give you an error when your templates get compiled. So you know your build system's gonna error out if you got invalid HTML, and it's a good thing. I think, you know, it's a feature actually, a nice little feature. So, are you happy with that response? Hopefully. All right, sounds good.
Is there any current way possible we can like hack this into a stable build of Ember now?
No, and don't try. Yeah, no, we're our goal. I don't know how long I can keep this thing on my face, but like my goal is to have it ready for like an alpha or beta release by EmberConf, so the end of March. So hopefully
what's left?
What's left? Oh boy, what are you? My project manager? I'm not used to this. So no, I'm just kidding. So basically, a lot of the HTMLBars stuff is done like at the compiler level. It's really a lot of runtime stuff. Like for example, we don't have any of the unbound helpers written. We only have started writing some of the bound helpers in bound templates. So my plan is, because I'm a busy guy, I'm going to enlist the support of our community to help fill in some of the gaps. And so the minute that I feel like we've got a solid structure and some example code for people to cargo cult, you'll be able to contribute. So I'll be blasting out on Twitter, who wants to write the if helper, you know, like, so we'll get everyone involved, and we're going to try to make this EmberConf deadline. So,
sweet.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Other questions for Eric?
You said that refactoring the view layer lays a foundation for animations. Could you talk a little more about that?
So animations, I'm going to be a little hand-wavy because animations isn't really like my specialty. I don't really do a lot of animation stuff myself. Chris Selden is kind of like one of the animation gurus. But basically the idea is right now there are no guarantees when you actually have an element. So like obviously in did insert element you have one, right? But sometimes that's too late to do something for an animation, right? Like you might get a little flash or something because it's already in the DOM. You might want to manipulate it or whatever. So ideally, So will insert element kind of works today. I don't exactly know off the top of my head the edge cases, but there are cases where will insert element does not actually have an element. I think we consider it a bug, but it's a hard bug. Like we're kind of like we're kind of hitting ourselves for having that hook when we can't really fully support it with the way Ember works right now. So the idea is, you know, the current, we're like I said, we're doing the foundational kind of groundwork stuff just to make it possible to actually animate views consistently at a, you know, primitive level of just like the elements about to get inserted. We have the reference, but it's not in the document yet. It's not in the body. So you can do things like set, you know, properties on it to like hide it so that it's off screen, so that when it becomes on screen, you can set a CSS class and it can animate, right? So, so that's kind of the level that we're thinking at right now, but it's definitely a goal of Ember to have built-in animation support so that we can do more sophisticated transitions and stuff with a declarative syntax and kind of abstract that stuff for you. So.
We're going to take 2 more questions. Jonathan's got the first one. Oh, excellent. Maybe do we have any other questions on the floor? Right here.
So I use HTMLBars a lot.
Oh God, no. You should use Emblem. Talk to Alex. Use Emblem.
Oh, sorry, no, I am using Emblem. I switched to Emblem recently.
Yeah. I don't know if that's insulting or a compliment now. we troll HTMLBars because it's kind of
I started on
anyways,
it. Yeah. How long is it going to take until that switches over?
When is Emblem going to have HTMLBars support, Alex?
Yeah. How long do you think that'll be?
Vanna White here.
Yes. So one of the nice things about how HTMLBars was architected is that actually Handlebars itself was also architected this way, in that it's actually a full-on compiler. It has this AST. Was anyone at Brooklyn.js here? Oh man, crickets. Oh yeah, right. So AST is a douchey term that something. Anyway, sorry, I just isolated 99% of the people in the room. Sorry. So there's an abstract syntax tree. Basically, Handlebars breaks down all your text code into like different compilable, you know, nodes. And one of the nice things about HTMLBars is that that part is preserved. The output of this first step of compiling your templates in Handlebars is this thing that is passed to HTMLBars, which sort of goes through that generated tree and does all of its like DOM-specific magic. So Emblem was made in such a way to output a Handlebars AST, so I don't think anything actually needs to change in preparation. There's probably some small things I'm not thinking of.
So basically what Alex is saying is that he programmed to the public API of Handlebars' generated output, and so all he has to do now is just care about HTML and emit the same expected output for the HTML structure that HTMLBars is going to expect, and then things will just plug in to the bound templates, for example, or to the HTMLBars runtime. It doesn't care. It's just the same AST is getting generated by HTMLBars itself or from the Emblem compiler, and then that feeds in. You know, that gets pre-compiled, and then in your app, there's a runtime, you know, like that has like the DOM, you know, functions and stuff, and that's just going to hook up all the same. So,
I literally think I have to do
architectural wins for the win. Is that a thing?
And with respect to Handlebars, for anybody who is using it, that's not how Handlebars was built, which is part of why Alex built Emblem in the first place. So that will be a different story.
Yep.
Do we have one more question before we wrap up? Okay, awesome.
Right, sweet.
So let's give a big round of applause to Eric, and then I'll tell you where we're going to drink. Great. So if you're interested in coming out for a drink, and I hope that you are, we're going to go to Rye House, which is on, it's 11 West 17th, between 5th and 6th. I've put it on the Ember NYC Twitter feed, which you should follow if you haven't. And would love to see you there for a drink. Also, Pivotal has asked me to make sure that we do 8 people to an elevator so that nobody gets stuck and spends more time here than they plan to. The stairwell to the left of the elevator will be open, so you can take that. It's just 1 flight down. Thank you all for coming out. I hope to see you on March 27th. Thanks to all of our speakers, Corey, Janessa, and Eric. Great job.
Thanks, guys.